I suppose I will do one in English because I am not very accustomed to that. No, but I think it's a good thing to do. I never really talk English. Never even write anymore in English. I do read a bit, but not too much. 142 not heller. I don't. I don't even consume much. Well, some, but not as much as earlier. When I had a lot of free time, I did consume a lot of English videos, really. But I think I don't read much less than earlier. But video content, I think, is quite diminished. But anyway, I think it's quite a long time ago I did in English. Years. That's at least a guess. But yeah. I heard somewhere sometime that well, in the same way that you there's a custom or you adapt your speech to different environments and so forth. You in a sense you're not sort of schizophrenic or like have different personalities, but in some way you adapt to, like, you use a different language with some different people and so forth. I mean, in your own language, of course, unless they speak a really different language. But in the same way, you adapt then, and some would bring out different aspects of your personality, of course, which you do in different groups. I think I don't remember where I heard it, but I think it's a common thing that you say that you. Well, at least for me, it seems it's. I don't feel as exactly as the same person when I'm speaking English. Well, it's no an exaggeration, but I feel a bit different. Not the exact same me in some way. Anyway, it just I just heard about that. I just have a glimpse of a memory that I've heard something about that. Other people say or something. I don't know. But anyway, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but that's the way it's been for most of the time when I started to shoot a video. So I don't think I will die. It's quite okay with me that I don't know what I'm going to say. As I said last time I did one of these videos, the worst thing that can happen is that it is a video with me sitting silent. What a tragedy. Tragedy. If how the do you pronounce tragedy? Tragedy. Well, as I said, it was a long time ago. It was a very long time ago I spoke in English. So forgive my pronunciation if it's terrible. Tragedy. How how do you tragedy tragedy tragedy? That's a tragedy. Yeah. Hope. I'm so used to speaking Swedish and just doing it my way, my just yeah, spontaneous. So exclamation. What's the word? Yeah, it's actually feel a bit unaccustomed to it. I have to say, I yeah, it's like all my intuitions for just short. What should you call it? Comments. It's off. Anyway, I guess I should talk about something relevant, like what yeah, academic models or something like that. Something important, something good. But yeah, I'll go with the silent thing, I guess. This is boring. So nedrans, boring. What should I do? What should I do? Je ne sais pas. I should talk about something rational, something smart. But my brain is empty as empty something. I do not know what to talk about, and this is the most trivial video I have recorded in a long time, if not ever. Nope. I don't even have phrases for it. What's annars då in English? Others though? Well, I guess that my brain will fire off something soon. That's usually what happens when you just talk. I mean, yeah, like now, something popped up in my mind. And the thing that popped up was that usually when you have stuff in your brain and have lots of what you call impressions that come in during the day or last couple of weeks, months, years, depending how deeply ingrained it could be from years back, but eventually the mind starts to sort of raises ideas and stuff, and I usually use this for get good to practice, like for in Swedish just to talk, but also to another purpose with it also is that you ingrain ideas in your head, but you in order to just to make knowledge, like if I've read something or learned something, in order to just ingrain the idea, yes, and you really learn them. It's just not like, it's not only to get it in, because if you only get it in and never get out, never like use the knowledge, talking about it, like my my mother actually studied what's the English word? pedagogy, pedagogy, pedagogue. You're a pedagogue. You study pedagogy, pedagogik in Swedish. Anyway, she always says that it's reflekterad kunskap, reflected. And it's actually, I've found that it's really, I think I've been doing a lot of stuff, what's learning, but in the end, I think it's actually, she's quite right. It's not much more about it than that. Well, I mean, it's of course a lot, but I think that sort of encapsulates it a lot. Although if you do it in speech or writing, it's usually that's a good way of making it reflected knowledge. But if you reflect on it, that's really when you, it's not just ingrained like rote learning, you just memorize, even though it could be very good to memorize stuff, of course, but when you reflect on it, it's more ingrained then, because it's like Whitehead talks about, the great philosopher. It's more connected to others' ideas and does not become inert knowledge that he warns about, not just isolated chunks of knowledge that you have in your brain, and only thing it's connected to is probably the root way you did to memorize it. But if that's the connection, it's just a tool for remembering it and not a tool for connecting it to other thoughts. That the what's it called, the neurons or the neural pathways that you want to have is that from the knowledge to other bits of knowledge, not just trivial memorized sequences. That could be a very good start. I mean, it's sometimes even extremely necessary to do, but it's the connection of that knowledge that when you have used that, you want to use that to connect to other types of knowledge, or the knowledge that's really connected also in real life. I mean, if you have a trivial memorizing way to memorize something, it's not that trivial thing is not something that's have something actual in reality. It's just a way of remembering it. But yeah, anyway, but yeah, so reflective knowledge, and just, I guess if I hadn't turned up this video here right now, I would not have reasoned about this. I might have reasoned about, thought about something else, but probably not these things. And I also think just the act of speaking triggers the brain in another way than just thinking. Sometimes I think it can be advantage to just think and not speak. I don't think it's that the one is better than the other, but I think it activates different parts of the brain, and also therefore different just chunks of knowledge. I don't know if some chunks are more like closer to speech and some are more to thoughts, but I do think that you some way triggers different modes of them, or some different, yeah, in some way. I don't know exactly how to put it, but anyway, I think it's also like you also, when you speak, you in some way, even if you're doing for yourself, I think you're in some way always not accustomed, but adapt what you say to your expected or imagined audience in some way. You always have, I think, even if you're I think you're totally alone, I think you still sort of adapt to some, in the same way that you can have games in your head, like people, and you think about instances, and at least I have, and I don't think I'm insane, I have can come up with an example, or that it has happened recently, but but it just generally having a conversation in your head and you thinking about how I would react in that situation, and you have the game in the same way. I think you on a subtle level always have that sort of you have a slight sort of take on what some at least some person would perceive what you're saying, even though you haven't thought up an audience in your mind, even if you're like even thinking, but even if you're talking to yourself or writing something, you have some voice in your head that thinking how's this perceived, and just that, and that's even more concrete when you're talking, I think, than if you're just thinking. And I just think that's sort of, I think it's, you could see that it's inhibit thoughts. I mean, you want to adapt it so that people perceive it as, and then it's an incentive to perhaps don't say things that are uncomfortable. But anyway, I think it's I just, my point is, I don't know all about this, but my point is, I think it triggers, it probably makes you more engaged, and then when it makes you more engaged, I mean engaged because you have to adapt to a some imagined or real context, social context, and then if your brain fires off more of because of that, I think it also it's good, probably get more ideas or something. I think it's, yeah, I think it's I think that too. I think, but I'm not sure, but I think so. That's the case. But I'm gonna think about it. No, but I actually think that's the case. But I guess that train of thought just stopped there, and I don't know what to continue with. Well, I don't feel like my English self. I just feel very weird doing this in English. I don't know why. It feels not uncomfortable, but different. Not like, it's like cycling sort of a bike that if you're very accustomed to doing bicycle, and then you switch to another bike, or if you're very accustomed to just writing on a keyboard on your computer, and you change computer or keyboard, it's odd. I don't know what else to say, but it's quite a good comparison, switching keyboard or computer or phone. I mean, imagine you just switch your phone. It feels quite odd in the beginning if you have a different phone. Anyway, yeah, plus I had to have something to talk about, but just we don't know what to talk about. Je ne sais pas. Je ne comprends. Something I have to talk about, but I don't know what. Books. Always good to talk about things that you've learned. Have I learned something? Not something interesting. Really? Yeah, I read Steven Pinker's Enlightenment Now. I think it's in English. Yeah, Upplysning in Swedish. So yeah, it should be. Exclamation mark. Explanation? No, exclamation mark. That's the word, right? exclamation. An exclamation sounds like something you throw out to yourself. To make exclamation, to make a claim. Extremely, lamely. No. Sorry. Yeah, anyway. I read Biddin's book, and he says, and actually the introduction, I like the introduction. Sometimes he's funny. I'll listen to videos, and I think he is really funny. And he's also of course very intelligent. Sometimes I can get a bit, but I guess it's just the science of it. I mean, some data, I don't know what's the right pronunciation, is just quite boring. But I guess that's the thing. I mean, not all knowledge is your passion, and so in some passages in his book, it's sometimes I think it's interesting, and sometimes I'm like, not so much. But even in general, compared to tons of other books, I think it's extremely interesting book. But passages. This is quite embarrassing. Passages. Passage. Passages. Sorry. This is funny. Anyway, something are a bit dull, perhaps, but that's just, I mean, you have to have the knowledge, and some, not all. But my point was that, yeah, the introduction is really just to be clear, I mean, if you're providing an argument for something, I mean, all part of the arguments are perhaps not like euphoria. I mean, you have to go through some, like my training buddy said in track and field when we were going through hell. He said you have to go through hell to get to heaven. I think it is at least a quite good thing to think about when you push yourself through something that you just don't want to talk about. But yes, so I mean that's just the sort of power of long-term thinking. I mean, some things are really necessary to do, and something can be quite dull and boring, and you have to go through that too in order to have an argument. If you're really passionate about the argument, probably those parts will feel more exciting. But anyway, I should go back to the introduction, because I think the introduction is the most interesting part, because he says, among other things, that, and really he also makes one word even clearer to me, which is humanism, which I've found is quite not that often used, but I actually want to know what it means, or how it has been used, and how most people think about it. I don't even know what that means, to be honest. I thought I knew. I mean, it's something that, even growing up, it's in my family, it's something that it's not talked about a lot, but it's something that's like, well, that's a good thing, sort of obvious good thing. And then he connects it to, well, he said the Enlightenment was basically about, what he says, well, he actually I usually don't read translations, but at this time I actually bought the book, because I actually met him in person, or I at least get a book autograph what's the word for an autograph in Swedish? Autography. Well, what he does with his pen when he writes his name. Anyway, on that book, because I was on an event in Sweden, in Stockholm, and got his he wrote his name on my book. But it actually was on the Swedish translation, so usually I would like to buy the book in the same language that it's written, which is easy to say because most of only thing I read when it's not Swedish is English. So, but well, if it's in French, I will. In German, I will, or any other language, I will, of course, buy the Swedish version or English translation, of course, if that's easily available. But yeah, so I don't know what his word he used in English, but I guess it's förnuft. I guess it would call just reason or yeah, but he said humanism, reason, and something third word I don't remember. But and he connects that to the Enlightenment. That's really what it's about. And what he says, I don't remember everything, but I think it's interesting because I connected somewhat to the historian Will Durant, who says that it's one of the most, what he said, the most admirable or good or purposeful thing to do in life, sort of, is to transfer as much as possible from the civilization heritage to the next generation. And when he says that, Pinker says that that's basically what he wants, sort of. Well, he doesn't exactly use those words, but I guess he has a similar understanding. But what he wants to do is, he thinks that every generation has to sort of redo it or remake the understanding of those ideas for that time. And I think that's true. And I also think it's, well, shouldn't say it's done automatically, but it's, most people just think and do stuff, and that happens. But yeah. But he also said something that I was not sure I understood, or just intuitively. My English sucks, it feels like, but intuitively, he says, I'm not even sure I agreed, or I'm not sure I've understood him right. I don't really know what I think, but he said that, yeah, he's probably right, perhaps, but he said that those ideas and the way we looked at them then, I think it was in that book, yeah, the way we looked at it then becomes sort of obsolete today, where it becomes just the feeling of it doesn't feel right. But I'm not sure what he meant, because in a way I often found it even more intriguing to read something that is not sort of diluted by a new take on it. Only, I mean, you want both. I mean, you want old books and you want new understanding. The understanding usually gets further later on. Not always, but with perhaps better material sometimes. But I'm not sure what he meant when he said that. I think we always have to do it anew, but I'm not sure that the old becomes, well, I usually think of it as more interesting when it's older, just for some reason. But maybe the old way of looking at it is, I don't know if he made just an argument for that the emotions we're just so tired of it, so that, because that's one thing he also brought up, that what he called his general thesis is that I think is perhaps like enlightenment, and I also think like liberal ideas, and what's the more thing word he uses for it, with something more, but that in general we don't give those ideas enough credit, and that's connected to this general thesis in the book, that we just sort of take them for granted and don't give them enough credit because it have done so, and that's in the general thesis that the world is really getting better, and we shouldn't just feel that everything is bad just because we overestimate the bad things that are happening. In some ways, of course, there's huge risks and so forth, but in general, people are getting better lives and so forth, and that's his general thesis. And I think I think he's right, but I don't want to say but like the thing he mentions, he actually says that. But because I do think there are some side effects that are quite huge, and I don't, and he even brings up that as a thing that and one of those things is that the effects of, well, he says just that we're just religiously sort of ungrounded sort of, and people make that as an argument for it's not getting better. Like one example, and among many, of what people use as an argument to say that it's not getting better, it is bad. And I think that, but I do, yeah, but even though I would, yeah, but that I think he uses as an argument against those who goes very far in that direction, to say that everything is like extremely bad. But for me, I think that I do think it is extreme, but I don't think it's just only connected to religion. Of course, I think it's connected to just the way we live, like not living in a village, a small village, or just a clan of people. But that's been the way as long as civilization's been. But most people have lived as farmers, so just with close. And I think, but at the same time, it could be lots of other issues, even social then. But I think we were in some way still quite a lot much more grounded in both like nature and animals and social life. But it could be quite common that you have really lacked some of them, like a parent could die, or you never found a mate, you never got any children that survived. I mean, it could be brutal, of course. So, and that's why I think his point is, I won't say obvious, because that would make the book unnecessary. Well, okay, lots of obvious things are not widespread, but it's good. I don't know what to say, but I totally, I think I agree on the general thesis. That I can't say I wouldn't, but I did thought about it when he said that, because I do think it's a quite extreme issue, that just the social part would usually, and that's why I thought you mentioned religion, because that's usually that's a way of, in a civilized world, even if you're on the brink of, like you're a farmer or something, even you're still sort of connected. What you're connected to is usually, except your family, it's basically you have a church or something. I mean, it's so integral a part. And when you add up like urbanization and all that, when you move to towns and industrialization, you move to towns, and that's your social life could really be fucked up. I mean, if you just move to new places, and nowadays, when the liberal world, another book that talks about that, paradox of choice. Very Ward. It's similar to a liberal. It's more problem with a liberal society, and that's the general thing with liberalism, or everything that's liberal, that's free for up up to grabs, up for grabs. What do you say? 4 grams, 2 grabs. It's many decisions, and you it's an opportunity, but it's also a sort of, if you don't, if you could, there's so many things you can choose between, and there's so many, like the freedom of being on your own also makes you on your own. So it's a double-edged sword, sort of liberal, to have a free, like freedom is really, you want it, but it's a quite heavy burden. I think you can describe it. Freedom is a heavy burden. It's a desirable burden, but it's heavy because it's, you really have. I've never thought about it in that way, but yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's a heavy burden, but you want that burden, the burden of freedom, but not perhaps total. Well, it depends what you mean. I mean, some things, I mean, you're never totally free. I mean, there are lots of things that you're dependent on other people, and other people guide your life, especially when you're young. Like, you can't say you have determined everything that happened in your life, especially when you're young. I mean, your parents did for you, and it's a gradual transition, and it's people in your environment, the state, the economy, incentive structures, the capitalist societies driving your incentives in certain ways, so you're always channeled to, which makes it extremely interesting, really. There's a psychological, genetic, chemical soup that's bumping into other soup, and carbon molecules, and no, anyway, and well, I grabbed too much here. Where were my old ideas? I lost train of thought here, but this is the nackdel. What's that in Swedish? In English, this is the con of doing it in audio. You can, when you write, you can go back to your thoughts and see where were I, but now I have to stop and re-listen, if that's or to think, which makes it hard. Anyway, this is actually interesting, but yeah, so yeah, where's chemical soup? You're an organism, just, yeah, the social part, when you get into urbanization. What's between the chemical soup and urbanization part? I forgot where I was. And that was the most interesting part. Why did I forget it? Anyway, it is. I think it's, yeah. It is. I think it is quite disturbing. Or a lot of people can be sort of disturbed by just having your social relationship. Yeah, I talk about freedom, and that's the thing. You have a lot of freedom, and there are a lot of things that are more effective, and it gives you time, and that's amazing, because that makes you smarter, because at least if you use it well, which hopefully you do, if you're obliged to go in school, so but it is interesting, because everything is going together. I mean, politics, I mean, biology, incentive psychology, and you're just that's where I get that you're just a soup of genes in that gigantic soup, where you have incentive structure from capitalism, and you have, or other, if even if we're capitalism, we have other incentive structure, probably worse, but who knows if there is something better. Or just people that guide you in different ways. And but now we have so much time, so we can have to think, but and we can make choices, and we can have multiple, not just it's not just a heritage of your from your family, that if you're a farmer you should be a farmer. You can actually choose what's sort of suitable for you, but it is at a high cost. And it's the same way as, well, it's basically the same argument, I think, that both that Adam Smith and David Hume made, which is extremely interesting. And it's even the only part, or at least the part, I think, is it's that Marx got right, but that came from Smith and Hume. Well, yeah, but it's the same area, and that's the part of the alienation part that Marx talked about. But that's sort of similar. I mean, Smith warned for it, but in a different way. And it's basically about because at that time he saw how many people went from his farmer society, or even he compared to the Highlands of Scotland, where people have a sort of, he described it as if they had more integrity, even more sort of better character, like more socially, like more in the mentality, which are dying for your group, which sounds kind of brutal, but it's that, and that's a social connection, and it's, but yeah, that's something being lost when you go to a, as I described, mercantile society. I think it's explained it, and it's one thing is that you specialize, and that's his argument, that because he even describes it like the classic pin factory, that one person does one thing, and therefore it goes much more effective because one person gets specialized in one single thing, and that makes it boring. And he said and you get quite like dumb, even you get very good at that, but you get sort of, you don't have a rich understanding or knowledge of lots of, and even Whitehead connects to that and says that always hard to know where you should put Whitehead, but he's, when you dig deeper, he's quite quoted from brilliant minds, I think so. But he's quite it's like Freud, as I said, höga toppar, djupa dalar, high valleys, deep, high mountains and deep valleys. Much good things, and some things that you might be skeptical of, but he said that, yeah, it's sort of, he says in general, it's like if you're very, he talks like in philosophy more sort of general, but if you have something that's more specialized and compared to something that's not specialized, he said the unspecialized thing will usually survive longer, because the specialized will be better, but to that specialized environment, if he's specialized for a certain environment. But if there's a change, the ungeneralized or the non-special, where this is, I'm not sure I agree with it, but it sounds, initially when I thought about it, extremely brilliant, but the non-specialized will be more sort of broad in its, it will easier adapt because it's not so narrow in its specialty sort of. But yeah, anyway, and it's not necessarily talking about like species or anything. But anyway, Adam Smith and David Hume, their point was, even though there are a lot of costs to it, like that, for example, that lost in sort of even your character and spirit and your connection to people, even, it's worth it because it's such a, it's money, and money is like productivity, and productivity is basically more food, more food and more time and less damage basically to you as an organism. But yeah, so and it's basically the same conclusion that just Pinker wants to underscore, that yeah, it is better. Don't forget that. I think that's his main point, and I think it's obvious that it is actually is better, even though there are side consequences. It is better, but we still have to handle that, and that's perhaps my main. That's why I reacted when I read it, because it's. But I understand his, and I actually think I agree, but it's just that the general impression I just intuitively got was that it sounded as if it wasn't a problem, but of course that's not his fault. That's how my emotions reacted to it, even though that was not really what he said, I think, perhaps. But so yeah, so I totally buy that point. It is a good point, and it's really a good book to write. But yeah, it's not without consequence. Like for example, like the chapter that I happened to read. I don't know why. I know I somewhat interested in environmental questions. Sometimes I'm more like, it depends. It really depends. I don't have a passion for it, but I happen to read quite a bit in that chapter about, and that's one that's an example of like a side effect or something that you have to handle. I don't usually he says that it's going forward, or it's better. That's usually what he writes. But maybe yeah, I think his main point in that, because he can't say it's getting better or bad. Well, it depends, because there's the environmental challenges. I think I think I believe that they're happening, and so forth. But I'm definitely not an expert, so I don't know. It sounds reasonable, but what to do about it, and that is more. Well, the even bigger question is that you even can question it, but but yeah, I really buy the Elon Musk argument. If it's an 1% chance that the world will go under, it's enough to take action in some way, or at least like just investigating, going further and trying to do something, and so forth. But yeah, his main point there was that, I think the point he wanted to make when it comes to environment was just that, because some people take this as the environmental things, or you can connect this to thoughts about feel, that that's a long time, months ago I heard the arguments, but it's something like he talked about, it's almost like the environmental debate goes into sort of an apocalyptic sort of end of the world type of argument, and it's similar. And this is what Pinker warns us about, that if you that to look at progress as in itself a way to an apocalyptic, like Ragnarok. It's not, the world's not going, it's actually backwards to say that, because actually it's some of the poorest countries that per capita, at least I think, when they're going to more getting richer, they are actually like wasting a lot of each, because we're so many now. So it's actually, perhaps he means basically the mid sort of half poverty. I'm not sure what he talks about. But many unindustrialized, or many parts of the world anyway, that's not very rich, pollutes the environment a lot. So it's being richer is a way to finding more. Then you actually have resources to produce things in a way that doesn't pollute the environment. I think that's his. I'm not sure that we, well, unless it's state intervention, I don't think we actually would use a method that's not cheaper. I mean, if it costs you more, you wouldn't use it. But we have science that can make them cheaper, perhaps. And science comes out of effectiveness, and that comes out of general progress. And that's even the most. I mean, I couldn't be more sympathetic to that idea, that progress, of course, that's my deepest passion of all. That's the progress of human civilization. I mean, that's the most. So that's where I definitely is with him too, and I like that he argues against, because most of the chapters is more about that. Just it's getting better. And I'm going to prove why, and he does it well. I haven't read it, but I trust him quite a lot. But I should read more in depth, of course. But that chapter is more about, actually, because it's not obvious that environment is getting better in that sense, but the progress in itself is still the way to get around the problem. So I think that's really, 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 really good point. It's not just about shutting down society and just not using energy or just like moving into caves again. I mean, you can do it if you want to, but no one will, at least for a time. So yeah. Well, I'm actually positivt överraskad. Vad är det in English? What's överraskad? Stunted? No. Surprised, is it? I'm actually positively surprised. What's that better expression in English for that? I don't know. I'm positively surprised by what I actually got out of this video. It was very interesting, actually. I like my brain, I guess. Narcissistic fuck. No, but I actually like the I could connect it to a lot of thoughts and stuff. But I don't think I'm going to continue now, but I want to I would like to save this. I wish I could save this mode of thought, but I guess that I will just try to. Well, that could be something I could talk about, but it's some more private. But why I want to know why it happened that I actually got quite uh, interesting ideas today, because that's actually something that I think it's important to think about how you work, how what makes your brain work, what makes you. And obviously, I read something, and that's a good thing. And obviously, I've read things before, so I could connect it to those things. But as in all things, you have to. There's so many factors, and I think one thing is I've been moving more, like just more exercise and stuff. And also could also be about people in my environment which have changed somewhat. Won't name any names, but it's yeah, it could play a role actually. And some yes, some I think some social things can just social things that happen that's don't seem to be extremely so like so significant, but they could actually add up and make quite a difference. So yeah, and just moving a lot, not necessarily train, or not. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Not training too hard. I think that. I mean, if you come from up on habit of in your life to train extremely hard, I think I mentioned it with you before this, and they put it very well in Idrottens återhämtningsbok. In English, it's sort of the athlete's recovery book, and it says that it's actually talking about specifically the nervous system in this chapter, but it says that it's easy to train and exercise a lot. It's hard to recover appropriately or something like that. And I think that's quite true. I'm not necessarily sure that it's easy to train too hard, but you could say it depends on what you mean with easy. It's really hard, yeah. But yeah, but yeah, it's just a symbol. Anyway, I shouldn't talk about that, but I think that could play a role. I think if I exercise too hard too often, I'm extremely tired. Even if I think I eat a lot, it's not. Yeah, I'm just tired, and it could be not just that day, but the day after. I'm just bah. I don't work because I'm exhausted, and I've just been moderately exercising, and I think that's very good. And yeah, I shouldn't get too deep into that, but that and just moving more and sun cream. It's sunny outside here in Sweden. And it's a bit warmer. It could be contributing a bit. Don't think that's the main thing, but who knows? I met a friend that I'm not met for a long time. I think that could be make some things changes to the brain too. But it was, but I think that could be one contribute a bit, but yeah, it was a couple days ago. So, but yeah, and I think there's some other social things that could contribute a bit too. I just realized it really comes down to a lot of social stuff, but at the same time, it's hard to see because it's always fun to know how would that have happened if I had not had that factor, and vice versa. That's extremely hard because it's hard to revise. You can't. It's hard to do that experiment again, and I think I find it very hard to just pinpoint that that was the factor that contributed to that and so forth. It is quite hard, but by when the time goes and you get older, I mean, you get a hunch of it, but you could be wrong. But you find things like usually are true. Like for example, some things I had with this when I'm going to meet this friend. I also remember that I usually get very happy when I meet friends. That especially if I've not met them in a long time. Afterwards, I usually feel very happy, and I've also so that's one thing that because not every time that's going to happen because you have other factors that could drag you down on that particular day or instance, so you can't, but over time you get more data and you get more secure on that thought that yeah, it's probably true. um, but yeah, so yeah, move a lot and eat a lot. That works for me at least because I never get too much weight. So yeah, I have to eat a lot. Otherwise, I get exhausted too. So we're all different. Mm. But of course, good food is always good food. Um, yeah, I don't think I will cram more out of this brain today in this video at least. I have to read my evening read before sleeping. So I think that's it. It did not become a silent video. I'm happy for that. Bye bye.